The rain fell in thick sheets over the small New England town of Grindlewood, drumming relentlessly against the steep-pitched roof of the Holloway family's Victorian home. With the wind howling like a wounded beast and lightning raking the sky with jagged claws of blue, it was the kind of storm that made the bones of the house groan. Ava Holloway stood at the threshold of the attic door, flashlight in hand, heart thudding in her chest like a tribal drum. The electricity had gone out hours ago, plunging the entire house into a stifling darkness broken only by flickering candlelight. Somewhere downstairs, her younger brother Jude was calling her name, but it sounded muffled, distant. They had moved in just 2 weeks ago. The house was a fixer-upper, left behind by a distant relative neither Ava nor her family had ever met, an old woman named Constance Holloway who died alone, childless, and forgotten. The house had stood abandoned for nearly 30 years, sagging under the weight of dust, memories, and secrets. Her mother had warned her not to go up there. "I mean it, Ava," she had said just days before. "That attic is full of things better left untouched." Constance, she wasn't right. But Ava was 17 and full of morbid curiosity. And tonight, with the storm raging and boredom clawing at her sanity, she couldn't resist the pull of the forbidden space any longer. The attic stairs creaked under her weight as she ascended, each step a groaning protest against her trespass. The air grew colder as she climbed, thick with dust and a sharp, metallic tang, like old blood. As she reached the top and pushed open the heavy wooden door, a gust of air rushed past her, extinguishing her flashlight for a second. The room was enormous, filled with old furniture covered in moth-eaten sheets, crumbling books, broken mirrors, and boxes sealed with wax. And in the far corner, something called to her. She couldn't explain it, there was no sound, no light, just a sensation in her gut, like invisible hooks pulling her forward. She found it inside an old trunk, its hinges rusted, the wood blackened with rot. Wrapped in a faded velvet cloth, nestled beneath yellowed bones that looked eerily human, was a board. A witch board. Unlike the glossy, mass-produced Ouija board she had seen in stores, this one was handcrafted. The wood was old, dark as obsidian, engraved with symbols she didn't recognize. The letters of the alphabet were scorched into the surface, curling like vines. The numbers 1 through 9 were painted in dried black ichor. The word, goodbye, sat alone at the bottom, cracked and peeling. But what chilled her most wasn't the board. It was the planchette. It looked carved from bone, real bone. It wasn't smooth or elegant like the ones she'd seen before. It was jagged, with sharp edges that cut into your skin if you gripped it too tightly. The center had no glass, just a black void, as if staring through it led to somewhere else. Something wrong. She shuddered. The rain hammered harder. The floorboards trembled. For a second, she thought she heard someone whisper her name from the shadows of the attic. She spun around, heart in her throat, but saw nothing, only her own shaky breath in the freezing air. Then she made her first mistake. She sat cross-legged on the floor, placed the board between her knees, and touched the planchette with trembling fingers. "Is anyone there?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the storm. "Nothing." She pressed a little harder. "I said, is anyone?" The planchette jolted violently, scraping across the board with an ear-splitting screech. Ava gasped and snatched her hand back, but it moved again, by itself. Yes. The word burned into her mind like a brand. She blinked. Her pulse raced. The air around her dropped to a bitter cold. "Who are you?" The planchette paused. Then, slowly, it spelled. WESEYOU. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She stared around the attic, heart thumping. A shadow moved just beyond her flashlight beam, too quick to catch. What do you want?" The planchette twisted violently, so hard the wood beneath it splintered. TOBEFRE. A low, inhuman moan came from beneath the floorboards. The walls groaned as if the house itself were waking from a long slumber. Ava scrambled backward, knocking over a pile of books. Her flashlight rolled away, flickering. Then she saw it. A reflection in the broken mirror across the room. Something stood behind her. Not a person. Tall. Slender. Cloaked in shadow. Its head tilted unnaturally to one side. Long, crooked fingers hung down past its knees. No eyes. No mouth. Just a blank, pale face like wax stretched over bone. She turned to scream, but nothing was there. The board. The planchette had moved again. Youarethekey. She ran. Tumbling down the attic stairs, bruising her ribs on the way down, she didn't stop until she reached the living room where Jude sat curled up on the couch, wide-eyed. "What happened to you?" he asked, staring at the dirt and cobwebs covering her sweater. She couldn't finish. Her teeth were chattering. She felt hollowed out. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, listening to the creaks in the hallway. More than once, she swore she heard the attic door opening on its own. Once, she even heard footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps outside her room. But when she opened the door, nothing. Just the hallway. Empty. Silent. But not safe. The next day, she tried to burn the board. She took it out into the backyard, poured gasoline over it, and dropped a match. It screamed. The flames hissed and then turned black, like burning ink. The fire didn't consume the board, it withered, folding into itself like a dying thing. The symbols on it moved, crawling like worms, rearranging into something new. The next morning, it was back in her room. On her desk. Pristine. No burns. No scratches. No smell of gasoline. Just one new word carved deeply into the center. Welcome. From that moment on, her reality began to crack. Her reflection in the mirror would sometimes lag behind her movements. Voices whispered to her through the walls, chanting in a language she didn't recognize. And Jude, he changed. He stopped speaking. He started drawing symbols on the walls in his own blood. One night, Ava found him standing at the attic door, whispering to it, his eyes rolled back into his skull. "I am the vessel," he muttered. "I open the gate." She pulled him away, slapped him across the face, screamed at him, but he only smiled, eyes still blank, and said, "She is waiting." That night, Ava had a dream, if it was a dream. She was floating above her body, the room around her dripping with blood. Her mouth was sewn shut with black thread, her hands bound by thorns. The witch board sat on her chest, the planchette pulsing like a beating heart. In the corner stood the same figure from the attic. But now it had a face. And it wore her skin. Ava Holloway hadn't left her room in nearly 2 days. The board now sat in the corner of her room, wrapped in an old blanket, locked inside her closet, buried under a box of books and clothing. And yet every night, she heard it. Scraping. Dragging. Like long fingernails clawing against wood. Each time she opened the closet, the board remained exactly where she had left it. Untouched. Silent. Watching. But she knew. It was awake now. Downstairs, the house had grown colder. Even in the peak of summer, Ava could see her breath fog the air. The Holloways had called electricians, gas workers, and even a priest. No one could explain why the pipes bled black water, why the basement door rattled every night at 3:06 a.m., or why the family cat had been found hanging by its tail in the laundry room, eyes missing, ribs torn out. Her mother had grown pale and quiet. Her father barely came home anymore, pretending the office had him working late. But Ava saw it. In the way they twitched at shadows, in how mirrors were now covered, in the way Jude kept humming that same damn tune over and over. And Jude. He was no longer her brother. She found him one morning sitting at the dining room table, head tilted unnaturally far to one side, a fork clenched in his hand, stabbing it repeatedly into the wooden surface in the shape of a circle, again and again and again. Jude? He didn't stop. Hey, she grabbed his shoulder. His head whipped around. Eyes pitch black. Mouth full of teeth that weren't human, too sharp, too many, like a shark's jaws in a child's face. She walks behind your skin, he said in a voice not his own. She waits where the blood runs backward. The waking gate must be fed. Then he blinked. The black vanished. His teeth were normal again. Ava, he asked, confused. What's wrong? He didn't remember anything. But Ava knew it wasn't Jude who had been talking. She researched it. Desperately. Scouring old books from Constance Holloway's private library, books bound in leather that didn't feel like cowhide. Books that smelled like rot and rain. Books filled with ink that bled if you touched the pages too long. She found the name written over and over again. The Waking Gate. One text stood out. When the gate wakes, the veil bleeds. Flesh is the lock. Blood is the key. The witchboard is the mouthpiece through which she speaks. The planchette is her eye. Once it sees you, you belong to her. Her. Who was she? The further Ava read, the more she realized, the board wasn't just a spiritual conduit, it was a seal. A prison. And it was never meant to be used. It had been locked away with intention, buried under symbols carved to keep whatever was on the other side contained. And Ava had broken the seal. When she asked that first question, when she touched the planchette. She had opened the waking gate. The house changed. It was subtle at first. Windows no longer showed the outside world. Instead, they looked out into fields of ash. Trees twisted like nooses. Crows with human hands for wings perched on the branches, heads twitching, eyes gouged out. The clocks no longer told time. They ticked backward. Every reflection showed a slightly different version of herself, one with too long limbs, or smiling when she wasn't, or bleeding from the eyes. And sometimes, they moved after she did. One night, she dreamt she was standing in front of the attic door again. Except this time, it was open. Inside was no longer the dusty attic. It was a church, black stone, cracked altar, dripping with melted faces. Candles burned with tongues instead of flames. And at the pulpit stood the figure again, the one from the mirror. Except now it had grown. Its head scraped the ceiling. Its arms dragged across the floor, ending in hands split down the center like the mouths of leeches. And its voice echoed through her skull. Your body is my cradle. Your breath is my hymn. Through you, I rise. She woke screaming. Blood oozed from her ears. Her bed sheets were soaked with freezing sweat. The board was on her chest, the planchette on her forehead. She screamed again and hurled it across the room. The next morning, it was gone. She tried to run. She packed a bag, took Jude's hand, and bolted out the front door just after sunrise. But as soon as they passed the gate to the property line, they were back in the house. Standing in the kitchen. Jude was humming again. And the board was waiting on the table. As if it had always been there. It was that night the gate truly opened. Ava sat alone in her room, whispering prayers she hadn't said since she was a child. Outside her window, the sky bled crimson. The stars were wrong, spiraling in on themselves like hungry eyes. The walls breathed. There were voices in them now, chanting in a language that made her nose bleed when she tried to understand. Then came the scratching. From inside her closet. Screach. Screawatch. And a single word whispered into her ear. Play. Her closet door creaked open on its own. The board slid out. The planchette leapt onto it with a wet, organic slap. Ava's body moved without her. She sat cross-legged, hands trembling, fingers placed on the planchette. The board pulsed beneath her, alive, beating in rhythm with her heart. "Is anyone there?" she whispered, even though she didn't mean to. The planchette twitched. "Why, yes." She shook her head. "No, no, no. Youare. What do you want?" "Thegat." The shadows around her thickened. Her reflection crawled up the walls, stretched across the ceiling, peeled itself free. It smiled. Ava screamed. The planchette burned beneath her fingers. The room spun. Her skin felt wrong, like it wasn't hers anymore. Like something inside her was wearing her from the inside out. Then Jude burst in, face pale, eyes wide. "As she's in the walls," he whimpered. "She says I'm hollow. She says we're all hollow." "Ava," he looked at her, horrified. "Your face, what's wrong with your face?" She reached up. Flesh was peeling. Not bleeding. Not damaged. Just sliding off like wet cloth, revealing something white beneath, something not bone. Something watching. The house began to shake. From the attic, the sound of dozens of feet stomping, crawling, slithering echoed downward. And from every wall, ceiling, and crack came the same chant. "The gate is waking. The key is bleeding. The door will walk. The door will walk. The door will walk." Jude began convulsing. Ava reached for him, but her arms stretched, too long, too thin, her fingers splitting at the ends. The board levitated off the floor, spinning, spinning, faster and faster until it exploded in a burst of black smoke. Out of that smoke she stepped. Not the figure. Not the dream. Her. A woman with no face. Dressed in rotting silk, her body stitched together from hundreds of different people. She walked on shattered bone. Her smile was carved too wide, reaching to her ears. Her eyes were stitched shut, but she still saw. She opened her arms. Ava fell to her knees. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. Just blood. And then the woman whispered in 100 voices layered over each other. "The waking gate is open. The vessel has accepted the flesh. Let the rite begin." The house was no longer a house. Ava Holloway awoke not in her bedroom, but in a space that defied all logic. The floor beneath her was made of wood, but it pulsed with life, veins just beneath the surface twitching with each breath she took. The walls wept black tears, and the ceiling was nothing but a swirling sky of gray flesh, stitched together by hooks suspended in the air. And in the center of the room, carved into the living wood, was a symbol. A circle with 13 jagged points. The 13th circle. The final seal. The completion of the gate. She stood up slowly, her limbs trembling, breath shallow. Every part of her body ached. Her skin itched, from the inside, and when she touched her face, she winced. The texture had changed. It was too smooth. Too perfect. Like wax. And behind her, the board sat waiting. Not on the floor. Not in her room. It was part of the wall now. A living extension of the house, fused into the timber, the letters glowing faintly, oozing black sludge from their edges. The planchette was embedded in the center, turning slowly like the ticking of a clock. Tick, tick, tick. From above, a voice echoed, not loud, but deep, as if crawling through her bones. She bleeds through 13. 13 marks. 13 sins. One key. One gate. Ava turned, stumbling back. The air shimmered, and the walls shifted. What had been a twisted version of her bedroom now unfurled like pages of a book, revealing a corridor of flesh and wood, where doors stood crooked and endless. And carved into each one, a number. 1, 2, 3. And so on. Each door screamed silently. She didn't want to move. But she had no choice. The house, the thing. Wasn't going to let her die. She had to play. She stepped toward the first door. Her hand trembled as she touched the knob. It was cold. Wet. Pulsing. She opened it. Inside was herself, age 6, curled up in the corner of a familiar room. A memory. A repressed one. She remembered this. The night she locked herself in the closet to hide from her father's shouting. The night she heard something in the dark with her. Something that whispered her name backwards. The little version of Ava looked up, and screamed. Because what walked in through the opposite side wasn't her father. It was her. Faceless. Stitch-skinned. Tall as the ceiling. Whispering in 1,000 dialects. Young Ava tried to run, but was snatched by the entity, lifted off the ground like a rag doll, and swallowed whole. Ava screamed. The door slammed shut behind her. When she turned, door 1 was gone. So was 2. Now 3 glowed ahead. She moved. Trembling. Crying. But unable to stop. Behind her, the board pulsed through the walls. It was following her. Growing. Door 3 led to a hospital room. Her mother lay in a bed, frail and dying. Tubes in her nose. Heart monitor beeping slowly. Ava remembered this. 3 years ago. The cancer scare. But in this version, her mother turned to her with hollow sockets and spoke in a voice not her own. You were always empty. You were always the gate. Ava stepped back. I should have drowned you the night you were born. The lights flickered. The walls peeled back, revealing 13 silhouettes, each one missing a face, surrounding the bed. They began to chant. Blood to blood. Key to key. Let the vessel split. The monitors went flat. Her mother sat up, skin splitting, revealing rows of teeth beneath. Ava screamed as the doors slammed behind her. The pain was real now. She clutched her stomach, something was moving inside her. Crawling beneath her ribs. Pressing against her lungs. Door 4 waited. Then 5. Each room peeled back another layer of her mind. Her memories were not hers anymore. She was inside them now. At door 7, Ava found herself back in school, surrounded by peers pointing, laughing. But their mouths extended too wide. Their fingers were needles. Their laughter sounded like screams reversed. She saw her old crush gouge out his eyes while chanting her name. At door 9, her father hung from the ceiling, mouth sewn shut, eyes wide with terror. The board was carved into his chest, and every time he blinked, a letter etched itself into the air. BLOOD. OPNS. THE. Door. By door 11, Ava wasn't even sure she existed anymore. Her fingers were too long. Her shadow moved on its own. She tasted iron in her mouth constantly, and every breath she took came with a chorus of voices whispering beneath it. And then, door 13. It wasn't like the others. There was no door. Only a mirror. And in it, Ava saw herself. But not quite. This version of her smiled too wide. Her eyes were empty sockets, dripping black oil. Her ribs jutted out from torn skin. She was wearing the board as part of her chest, fused to bone, the planchette embedded in her heart. Her reflection stepped forward. So did Ava. They met at the glass. And her reflection spoke, without opening its mouth. You are not a girl anymore. You are a womb. You are the passage. You are the 13th circle. And I am your reflection no longer. Then it stepped out of the mirror. Ava screamed as her reflection climbed out of the glass, shedding glass shards like scales, hissing, laughing, peeling its own face off and revealing her beneath. The faceless woman. The one from the dreams. The one from the gate. She had finally crossed through. Ava ran, but there was nowhere to go. The world was gone. No rooms. No walls. Just circles drawn in endless space, and in the center of all of them, the witch board. Grown to the size of a cathedral. Beating. Alive. The planchette hovered in the air, spinning in a storm of blood and symbols. Voices chanted from the dark. The gate is flesh. The flesh is the door. The 13th circle births the storm. She fell to her knees. All around her, the air tore open. Creatures began to pour through. Faceless things. Mouths with limbs. Children made of teeth. And at the center, towering above all. She stood. Draped in human skin. Antlers of bone jutting from her skull. Her voice now filled Ava's skull completely, like water drowning her thoughts. You are the gatekeeper. You are the offering. Speak now the final words. The board glowed. Letters danced. Ava couldn't fight anymore. She was breaking. Her mouth opened. The words weren't hers. I give myself to the gate. I give blood to the key. Let her through. The planchette plunged into her chest. Everything went black. She awoke gasping. Back in her room. It was morning. Birds chirped. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Had it been a nightmare? She sat up slowly. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Jude's laughter echoed from downstairs. Her phone buzzed with notifications. She could almost believe it was over. Until she looked in the mirror. And her reflection didn't move. It stared back. Smiling. Behind her, the witchboard waited on her desk, pristine. And carved into its center, still wet with blood, was a single word. Through. The sunlit illusion didn't last long. Within hours of waking, Ava realized that reality was broken. At first, it was subtle. The birds outside chirped in reverse, song spirals played backward like corrupted audio. The digital clocks blinked nonsense, E1. The refrigerator hummed a low, guttural chant beneath its mechanical whirring. Then came the reflection again. Still smiling. Still not moving with her. It watched, patiently. Mockingly. Jude refused to acknowledge anything strange. He was cheerful. Too cheerful. Ava found him at the breakfast table humming that tune again, swinging his legs and eating raw meat from a cereal bowl. Jude, what are you eating? He looked at her with his wide, innocent eyes. Laughter. His mouth opened too wide. Far too wide. Black fluid trickled down his chin. Ava staggered back. Who are you? Jude giggled. I'm not Jude anymore. I'm just space she left behind. He placed his spoon down and tilted his head until his neck cracked. She's inside you now. Can't you hear her crawling? Ava backed out of the kitchen, heart thudding in her ears. The hallway stretched farther than it should. The doors multiplied, warping across the walls like tumors. Every photograph had changed. All her family's faces were gone, blurred out, melting, grinning. Even hers. She raced to the bathroom and slammed the door shut. The mirror didn't show her reflection anymore. Instead, her reflection stood there, breathing heavily, blood dripping from sockets where eyes should be. Ava slammed her fist into the glass. Stop. I'm not your key. I'm not your gate. The mirror cracked. The cracks bled. On the wall behind her, a message slowly wrote itself in dripping letters. Woi fo tua niklat mi tub. But I'm talking out of you. She turned around. Nothing was there. Then she felt it. A soft, wet breath on her neck. A voice, whispered backward, slid into her ear like a cold worm. Imak neeb sa es. Yo roi fo tua swordcab sepste dna niaps roi tai sepokas ew, epas cyanine rob si tag eti. She collapsed to the floor, holding her ears, screaming, the syllables searing her skull with every backward breath. That night, she did the one thing she swore she wouldn't. She touched the board again. But this time, it touched her first. It called to her in a dream where her body floated, skinless, in a void of chanting shadows. The planchette hovered over her ribcage, spelling words into her sternum. When she awoke, her chest was scratched raw, and in the center of her skin. Wearethsme. She returned to the attic. The air was thick, no longer with dust, but with breath. The attic inhaled and exhaled, the walls pulsing slowly like a living lung. The board sat in the center again, surrounded by 13 black candles, though she hadn't lit any. Ava stepped closer, unable to stop herself. Each time her foot touched the floor, the house whispered. Backward words. Kio imak edrep woi eon ro reverov. She placed her fingers on the planchette. She didn't ask anything. It moved anyway. Sjhasnoname. Ava's fingers twitched. Who is she? She whispered. The planchette answered in violent jerks. Sheistherevse. Theunmakng. Theblackmrr. The candles blew out one by one. And then. A 13th symbol burned itself onto the attic floor, a spiral twisting inward, not outward. A gate eating itself. The house shook. Board snapped. The floor cracked open beneath her and she fell. Into a room that shouldn't exist. It was made of teeth. Walls of them. Gums glistening with black spit. Saliva dripping like acid. Tongues flickered across the ceiling. In the center sat her. Now fully formed. No longer stitched together, but fluid, moving between forms, warping between faces, sometimes Ava's, sometimes Jude's, sometimes something older, a crone made of burnt roots and fire. And she whispered in reverse. Woi ta limzite niaga izur live I. Ava stepped back. I won't let you take me. The board hovered in the air behind her. It screamed. Not in sound, but in meaning. You have already been taken. Suddenly, Ava felt something inside her twist. Her skin rippled. She dropped to her knees, convulsing. Her mouth opened, but not in a scream. Words spilled from her throat, backward and not hers. Te roi ni sengam eco ninrub, selchuo roi gwart eknadizernu, eknalubmas edikovni ew. Anab morph denrob woi ero, saf ni timsurka sa niklat ero woi. Blood poured from her eyes. Her fingers bent backwards, cracking. The floor opened like a mouth. And she stepped forward. You are the 13th voice, she said, now speaking forward. You are the only one who can silence the light. So, silence it. And she reached into Ava's chest. Her hands passed through flesh like smoke. Ava screamed, silently. Her voice was stolen midair. Her vision turned black. She woke up inside the board. Everything was black wood. Letters formed the sky. Symbols burned across her arms. She was part of it now. A ghost trapped in its circuitry. A soul made language. And from outside, in the real world, she saw herself. Standing upright. Smiling. But it wasn't her anymore. It was her wearing Ava's skin. Then came Jude. He entered the attic, blank-faced, humming again. "Ava?" he asked. The creature wearing her face turned. And in Ava's voice, it whispered. "Come play." The board glowed red. The gate opened again. And Ava, trapped inside the board, screamed silently as Jude stepped toward it. Everything began again. The circle never ends. The attic was silent. Still. And yet, breathing. Ava watched from within the board, a prisoner trapped in the grain of cursed wood, her screams reduced to static in the space between the letters. Her consciousness bled through the blackened alphabet, her soul stitched beneath the symbols like skin under cracked glass. Outside her prison, she walked freely now, wearing Ava's body like a cloak, every movement too fluid, every smile carved too wide. The creature that had crossed through the waking gate had mastered the vessel. And Jude. Jude stood in front of the board again. His eyes were wide, blank, like two polished stones. "Ava?" he asked, voice shaking. The impostor turned, Ava's face stretched into an unnatural grin. Her eyes no longer blinked, they swirled, black spirals drawing everything in. "Play with me, Jude," the creature whispered. "Let's talk to the other side." Jude hesitated. He looked at the board, and for a brief moment, Ava saw him, the real Jude. Peering into the wood, as if he could feel her trapped within. She pushed, desperately. She screamed, not with voice, but with memory. She sent flashes of childhood, the treehouse they built, the comic books they read under the covers, the day their dog died and Jude cried into her lap. For a heartbeat. Jude trembled. Then the house spoke. A deep, wet chorus of 13 voices erupted from the walls, overlapping, not in harmony, but in agony. Sit. Touch. Bleed. Open. The planchette shot into Jude's hand. He couldn't resist. His fingers curled around it. The attic door slammed shut. The candles reignited, this time green. The air filled with choking sweetness, rotting flowers and burnt hair. Jude's eyes rolled back. The board groaned beneath his hands. And the 13 mouths opened. They came from the wood itself. Mouths. Formed from the grain of the floorboards, stretching open across the attic walls. No lips. Just gaping holes lined with infinite teeth, some human, others bestial, some made of bone, others dripping molten metal. Each one began to speak in unison, in different tongues, all backward, overlapping and folding into Jude's mind like knives. Mlla eknanetnium tsumwoi. Raya 8fo trib 8fo ejuo 8 ni tsefrepsa. Te roi ni evoli. Emiseb los woi nuya 8 wonklli. Ava, trapped in the board, tried to fight. But each attempt only brought more mouths. They peeled from the ceiling. Burst from the floor. And from within her own prison, mouths opened beneath the letters. They began to chant her name. Ava. 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 Until the board vibrated with their screeching worship. Jude began to bleed from his ears. He dropped the planchette, but it floated back into his hand like a magnet. The board burned beneath his fingers. His skin sizzled and fused to the planchette. He screamed. Then the fake Ava, the witch, the skinwalker, the reversed queen, placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered. "You must finish what your sister started." Jude cried, tried to pull away, but it was too late. The mouth spoke again, this time in a language older than time. The 13th circle beneath the attic glowed, the boards warping into flesh. Symbols erupted across the floor, and in the center. A cocoon. Made of hair. Teeth. Wood. Bone. It throbbed. Ava watched in horror as her former body, the witch, placed her hands on the cocoon. "Let the final form be born," she whispered. And the 13th mouth opened, from the cocoon itself. A new voice spoke. This one was familiar. Because it was Ava's. Not trapped Ava. But her voice being used, copied, mimicked. "Let me out," it said. "Let me out, Jude, please, help me." Jude's eyes widened. The fake Ava smiled. "Oh yes, she's still in there. But she's becoming so much more." Suddenly, the attic collapsed inward. The sky ripped open above them. Not the real sky. This one was blood-red, swirling with corpses and creatures with bells for eyes and smiling scars instead of mouths. The house had completed its transformation. It was no longer wood and brick. It was the waking gate. A monument to her, a sanctum of torment. And now, the final rite had begun. From within the board, Ava fought harder. She began to whisper names, the names from Constance Holloway's books. Names of binding. Names of resistance. Scariest. Nahum Seth. Vila Shar, bind her. The board screamed back. No names. But Ava kept chanting. The symbols on the board began to crack. Her prison trembled. The mouths noticed. And one by one, they began to eat themselves. Their teeth biting into their own flesh, their tongues severing themselves. The voices distorted. The attic shook. Jude fell to his knees. He cried, "Ava, if you're in there, tell me something only you'd know." And she did. She whispered into his mind the secret they shared. The time they buried a broken music box in the garden when their parents were fighting. He had forgotten. But now, he remembered. Tears filled his eyes. He turned to the board. He stared at the planchette. And he made a choice. He plunged the planchette through his own hand, pinning it to the board. The blood sizzled. The mouths screamed. The attic exploded in light. And Ava was ripped free. She gasped. Alive. Outside the board. On her knees. Bleeding. Screaming. The fake Ava roared, a voice so loud it shattered the windows in a mile radius. Her stolen skin began to peel, revealing the thing beneath. No shape. No form. Just screaming flesh. The witch surged forward. But Ava grabbed the bloodied planchette and drove it into the 13th circle. The symbol convulsed, rejecting the traitor. The board glowed white-hot. 13 mouths screamed one final time. Then. Silence. The cocoon collapsed. The witch's body convulsed, and exploded into ash. The attic returned to wood. The sky sealed. The mouths were gone. Ava sat. Trembling in the quiet aftermath. Jude lay beside her, unconscious but breathing. She looked at the board. It was now blank. Burnt. Dead. Or so she thought. Until she turned it over. And saw a new word carved in the wood. Listen. And from far away. In the stillness of morning. Came the faintest sound. Of a new mouth opening. Ava didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. She tried. She closed her eyes. But every time her mind drifted into the fog of rest, she would return, dripping with rot, faceless, whispering backward lullabies through the cracks in the dark. And the board, it didn't stay dead. At first, it just sat on her desk, charred and cracked, unmoving. Then the letters began to return. One by one. Etched into the wood by an unseen hand, seeping up from beneath the grain like black veins coming back to life. By the 4th night, it was whole again. And it whispered. Not in words. Not audibly. But in pulses of thought. Images carved themselves into Ava's dreams. An empty town, windows all watching. Hands digging through soil beneath her home. And something buried beneath the house, moving. The board wanted her to go down. To the basement. To the hunger below. She tried to resist. But the house wouldn't let her. The floorboards changed. Her bedroom door vanished. Every hallway bent toward one direction. Down. Jude, pale and silent since the attic, wandered like a ghost, muttering nonsense phrases. She's still in the pipes. The basement is older than the house. 13 mouths but only one throat. She's still hungry. Ava caught him standing at the top of the basement stairs one morning, just swaying, eyes rolled back. When she touched him, he whispered. She lives in the root cellar. Where the world ends. Where language dies. Then he collapsed. Ava had no choice. She descended the basement steps alone. The air grew colder with every step, thick with the smell of soil, mold, and raw meat. The walls dripped condensation. But the further she walked, the more she noticed something impossible. The basement was expanding. The staircase continued down past the foundation. The walls became rough stone, marked with symbols she recognized from the witch board. It wasn't a basement anymore. It was a temple. She reached the bottom after what felt like hours. Before her stretched an ancient chamber, cyclopean in size, with no visible ceiling. Roots twisted through the walls like veins, pulsating gently, as if feeding something deeper still. And in the center. A massive hole. Circular. Carved with 13 jagged glyphs around the rim. A mouth in the earth itself. She knelt beside it. Whispers poured from the pit like steam. But she couldn't understand them. Not yet. Then the board appeared again. Hovering. No hands. No tricks. It floated into the air in front of her, letters glowing. The planchette moved on its own. SHEISBNEATH. FEEDHR. Ava shook her head. No, it's over. You're gone. I destroyed you. But the pit rumbled. And then. A voice, clearer than ever, rasped out of the blackness below. Ava. I'm hungry. It was her own voice. Reversed. Twisted. Drenched in blood and memory. Suddenly. Hands burst from the edge of the pit. 13 of them. Long. Skeletal. Clawed. They began pulling something upward. Something massive. Something ancient. Ava turned to run. But behind her stood Jude. His eyes were black again. His mouth stitched shut. In his hands, a knife made of letters. He raised it, hesitated. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Then he whispered through sewn lips. Help me. And stabbed himself in the chest. Ava screamed. The earth trembled. The board spun violently in the air, bleeding ink. The glyphs on the pit lit up, one by one. 1. 2. 3. 4. Ava dropped to her knees and clutched Jude's body. He was fading. Bleeding out fast. No, no, please, you're all I have left. Jude smiled weakly. Then stop her. And he was gone. The glyphs continued to burn. 5. 6. 7. Ava rose. The board turned to face her. The planchette moved. C. Choose what, she whispered. The board answered. BETWN. BLOOD/VOID. 2 paths. 2 destinies. Feed the hunger, or silence it. Ava reached out. But before her hand touched the planchette, the thing in the pit finally emerged. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a god. It was absence. A hole in reality. A woman-shaped void made of screams, stitched with timelines, dripping reversed memories like sweat. And behind her, a city of mouths. A world built inside the throat of the waking gate. Ava realized the truth. The witch was never just one being. She was a collective curse. A memory of pain that needed flesh to live. And Ava, through her contact with the board, had been chosen to birth her into the world above. But Ava made a decision. Not blood. Not void. She chose fire. She yanked the burning glyph from the floor, its light searing her hands, and plunged it into the board itself. The wood split. The planchette screamed. The glyphs dimmed. The pit began to close. The thing shrieked, lunging toward her with arms made of faces, but Ava stood her ground. No more games, she said. No more gates. She pressed the glyph to her chest. Fire erupted. The pit collapsed in on itself. The mouth of the world sealed shut. The board shattered into ash. And everything went still. Ava awoke on the basement stairs. The house was quiet. Jude was gone. The board was truly gone. But on her chest, where the glyph had burned her, a new symbol remained. A circle. With 13 points. Still warm. Still pulsing. Like a heartbeat. They buried Jude 3 days later. The funeral was quiet. Cold. The sky hung gray over the procession like a shroud. No one else spoke. Only Ava stood at the casket as it was lowered into the earth, her hand pressed to her chest, where the 13th mark still pulsed beneath her skin. A heartbeat that wasn't hers. No one asked questions about the blood. About the fire in the house. About the strange symbol burned into the basement floor. No police came. No news. It was as if nothing had happened. But Ava knew better. Because the board wasn't gone. It had changed. And now it lived inside her. Every mirror reflected a slightly different version of her. One blinked slower. One smiled when she didn't. One had no face at all. Shadows whispered to her in reversed syllables. And sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she didn't see darkness. She saw wood grain. Endless letters etched into flesh. The board was alive, reborn in her blood. It had learned. Adapted. And it was waiting. That night, she woke up choking. Not from illness. From soil. Her mouth was full of dirt. She coughed and gasped and rolled out of bed only to realize. She wasn't in bed. She was buried. She clawed upward through wet, cold mud until her hand broke through the surface, and she emerged in a cemetery, Jude's grave behind her. She turned. The headstone now bore a new message. Th1 routine wa 1t. F1 rstm 0 uth opened. Her legs shook. And as she staggered back, she saw them. Across the cemetery, 12 more gravestones began to crack open. And from each one, something crawled out. The first had no head. The second bled shadows. The third walked backward, bones clicking. Each one bore her mark. They were avatars, fragments of the witch. Pieces of her spilled across flesh and time, now walking freely again. And Ava had opened them. She had become the 13th circle. And now the game was restarting. She ran. All the way home. Through screaming streets that no longer looked like her town. The trees had no leaves. The sky flickered like static. Windows whispered. People stared with wide, toothless smiles, frozen in place like mannequins, until she passed, and then their heads turned all at once. She walks. She watches. She wonders. She wins. Voices in unison. Familiar. Her own. She locked herself in the house. But it didn't help. Because the house was hers. And she was now its heart. The walls bled words. The TV played footage of her dreams. The bathroom mirror reflected a version of her with no eyes, just screaming mouths where her sockets should be. The board was everywhere. In the floorboards. In her heartbeat. In the way Jude's voice whispered in the corners of the silence. You didn't stop her. You became her. Then came the final moment. The board called again. But not to play. To finish. Ava stood in the middle of the living room, arms trembling, mouth dry. And from the floor. The planchette rose, burned, but whole. It hovered, rotated, and dropped, pointing to the floor. Ava knelt down. The floor cracked open beneath her knees, revealing black water swirling below. She leaned forward. And saw herself reflected in it. Only. Her face was gone. In its place. A circle of symbols. A spiral of teeth. And a message etched across her forehead. The board never ends. Suddenly, the room bent. Walls twisted into impossible angles. The ceiling opened into a sky that wasn't sky, just a pupil, blinking slowly. The floor dissolved into letters that rearranged themselves beneath her feet into sentences in a language no human had ever spoken. Ava began to float. Not fly, float, like a puppet rising on unseen strings. Her body convulsed. Her skin peeled away in layers, revealing not organs, but symbols. Carved into her bones. Burning in her blood. She screamed. But her scream came out in reverse. And the final voice spoke, not from her, but from everywhere. You thought you were the player. But you were always the board. And now. You are ready. The world collapsed. Not destroyed. Just rewritten. In the blink of a bleeding eye. She opened her eyes and found herself sitting at a table. Candlelight flickered. The air was thick with dust. Across from her sat a boy. Maybe 13. Pale. Scared. A stranger. He looked down at the board in front of them. Fresh. New. Untouched. He whispered. Is anyone there? Ava smiled. Her mouth too wide. Too sharp. Too wrong. And the planchette moved. Why yes. In the distance. 12 others waited. Their mouths already open. The game had begun again. Because the board never ends. The room is small. Dust dances lazily in golden rays of sunlight filtering through old lace curtains. The table in the center is circular, wooden, cracked. Atop it sits the board. Fresh. Pristine. Its letters gleam faintly, though no light touches them. The planchette sits idle in the center, perfectly still, yet listening. 3 children sit around it. A boy with a birthmark beneath one eye. A girl in braids, biting her nails nervously. And a quiet one, pale, with a distant gaze. They don't know why they found the board in the attic. They don't know who used to live in this house. They just know, something wanted them to find it. The braided girl speaks first. Okay, put your fingers on it. They do. Hesitant. Curious. Oblivious. The boy swallows hard. Is anyone there? A long silence. Then the planchette twitches. Once. Twice. And begins to move. Why yes. The children freeze. One giggles nervously. You moved it. No, I didn't. Swear on your life. The quiet one doesn't speak. Just stares into the board. And smiles. Somewhere else, far away, or maybe just beneath, a library of screams opens. Each book is a person. Each page a memory carved into bone. The shelves go on forever. And at the center, surrounded by floating mirrors, sits Ava. Or what was once her. She wears no skin now. Her form is shape and language and shadow. She is the board. She is the game. She is the invitation whispered in empty rooms and quiet attics. Every time someone touches the planchette, she awakens. Every time a question is asked, she grows stronger. 13 avatars walk the world now. Each one planting boards like seeds. Each one waiting to be found. And each time a game begins, a mouth opens somewhere beneath the skin of the world. Back in the small house, the children laugh. The boy leans forward. What's your name? The planchette hesitates. Then slides. SGWHOCNNOTBENAMED. They exchange glances. Is this a joke? But the quiet one finally speaks. Soft. Distant. It's not a joke. The others look at him. He meets their eyes. And says. She's been waiting for you. Somewhere nearby, a mirror cracks. A dog whines and won't stop barking at the corner of a room. The shadows in the hallway stretch longer than they should. And deep below the earth, 13 mouths begin to smile. Because once a board is found, it is never forgotten. And once you play, you're always playing. Whether you remember or not. The end.